Good morning, Year 7. I hope you enjoyed last week's lessons on the Renaissance and the Reformation. Today we're starting a new topic. You'll see from the summary that you can see on the screen now that our new inquiry question is what mattered most to Henry VIII. Yes, we're moving on to that most famous of English monarchs. Now, we're still in roughly the same period. Remember, the Renaissance starts in 1400, 1450. And we'd gone actually right up to sort of the 1600s when we looked at Galileo of Galilei and Isaac Newton. So we're still kind of in that same period. The Reformation is also happening in Europe around this time, around the time that Henry VIII is around as ruler of England. And actually, that stuff that you've learnt about the Reformation will become really important again as we go on to study Henry VIII and what he did. Your inquiry question, as you can see, is what mattered most to Henry VIII. You're going to be looking at three different periods of Henry VIII's life. When he was young, when he was middle-aged, 30, 40, and when he was old, 50, 40, 50. And you'll be asking, well, what really mattered to him during that period? And we'll be trying to find that out by looking at the things that he did, the ways that he acted. So you can go ahead, once you've looked at this summary page, and turn to the first lesson. And you'll see that the first lesson is what mattered most to young Henry. So we're working in these dates, 1509 to 1525. I'm just going to adjust my camera slightly because it's a bit out of focus. There we go, that's better. Now, as always, the first thing you're going to need to do is read the keywords and the definitions. Now, there's quite a few in this lesson. Some of them, like reign and monarch, you might have come across before, but lots of them you won't. Dynasty, court, and chivalry. And be careful on court, because we're not talking about like a sports court. It's something a bit different, okay? I need you to I need you to pause the video here and go and read the keywords and the definitions. Pause the video and do that now. Okay, once you've done that, you can go ahead and do the recap boxes. You know how these work. You answer the questions and write a definition for these words. A reminder that I've resent you the workbooks this week in electronic copy if you don't have your version at home. So you can look for your answer for who was Martin Luther at your work from last week. And if you're stuck on nobleman, you can look in your knowledge organiser. You've got organisers for cycle A, B and C in the front of that booklet. So it's all there for you. Once you've done that, you know you need to put these in order along the timeline. Make sure, like we've spoken about before, that you're drawing boxes to show. And then you need to put these events in order along the timeline. Now you notice this time that you haven't got dates. You need to add those dates yourself. Pause the video here. Complete this box now. Okay, once you've done that, to get us starting to think about Henry VIII, there is of course a picture of him on the left, one of the most famous paintings or portraits actually of Henry VIII during his reign as king. And I need you to work through tasks 1, 2, 3. You're going to first of all list 3 adjectives describing words you might use to describe the man in the picture. And who is this man? Well, of course, it's Henry VIII. Once you've done that, task 2, there's a beginning of a list of facts about Henry VIII. You need to finish that list and then continue to add your own facts that you know about him, before finally thinking about how he's painted, what he's wearing, what could he want us to think about him based on this portrait. Pause the video now and complete those tasks. Okay, we're not going to complete most of these. I think you can do those yourselves, but we will complete task 2 and possibly task 3 as well, actually. Now, of course, while I'm talking about his 6 wives, you might have been able to write that rhyme that maybe you learnt in primary school. Divorced, beheaded, died. Divorced, beheaded, survived. You might also have been able to write some of the names of some of his wives, such as Catherine of Aragon, or probably his most famous wife, Anne Boleyn. Really, what I was looking for in task 3, thinking about how he's painted, how he stood, what he's wearing, well, I wanted you to get that he stood in a very strong, powerful stance. He's wearing clothes that make him seem significantly bigger than he actually is. Look at his huge kind of shoulder pads here. Look at his chest all puffed out, standing very proudly. Everything is designed to make him look strong, powerful, proud. He clearly wants us to think that he's a proud and all-powerful monarch or king. Okay? Let's move on. Now, in this lesson, and in fact in all of the lessons on Henry VIII, you're going to be doing quite a lot of reading. Now, the first one, you'll see that there's some gaps there. Henry VIII ruled from 15 to 15. Well, I need to go back and look, if I can't remember, at the last page. And you'll remember that I've actually told you how long he reigned for here, from 1509 to 1547. So I'm just going to go ahead and fill that in here. Then you're ready to go off and read this information. Pause the video, read it to yourself now. Okay, I'm going to read it to you in case you struggled on any of those words. Henry VIII ruled from 1509 to 1547. This was a long time. Henry VIII changed a lot in that time. As a young man, Henry VIII was strong and athletic, a keen sportsman. He was especially proud of his strong calf muscles. That's the muscle on your lower leg. As he got older, Henry VIII got more and more overweight. His appearance changed greatly. He got a painful illness called gout, and some people commented that he was also very smelly. Not just Henry VIII's appearance changed. What mattered to Henry changed at different times too. That's what we'll study for the next 4 lessons. Now it says below the portrait is of a young Henry VIII. You can see the portrait here. At the start of his reign in 1509. What I need you to do is circle 2 things in the portrait that interest you. Now you should automatically be thinking, well, they need to be 2 things that I can infer some information about young Henry from. I can infer from the things I circle what mattered to him. Because you can see that the next question is, well, you do need to infer or work out what mattered to young Henry from the 2 things you circled. Pause the video now, go ahead and circle 2 things that interest you that you can infer information from in this picture. Okay, so if it was me, I think there's a couple of things I would be circling here. Now, first of all, I think I'd be circling his hat, because I think that's quite interesting. You can't see my pen very well on here, because it's blending in with the dark. But I also think I'd be circling this part of his coat as well. And I'll talk about why I circled those things in a minute. But whatever you've circled, I'd now like you to go ahead and do the second half of the task. You're going to write one thing you can infer from each of the two things you circled. And you must start with the sentence starters, one thing I can infer is, or a second thing I can infer is. Pause the video, write your inferences now. Okay, so if I take the hat, for example, well, I would write, well, one thing I can infer is that Henry VIII was interested in fashion. That's good, that's my inference, but I also need to say here why or how I worked that out. How did I infer that he's interested in fashion? So I'm going to say something like this, and a good sentence starter to use is, I know this because Henry is wearing a fancy hat that I can infer that, using that word again, was fashionable at the time. Okay? If you struggled to write your inference before, using my example, pause the video again now and write your inference or inferences for the two things you circled. Okay, so again, to give you another example, remember I circled this kind of section of his jacket, and I can see that that section of the jacket is some sort of animal skin, possibly leopard, I think. So again, I'm going to write, well, a second thing I can infer is that Henry was wealthy and wanted to show off his wealth. And again, I'm going to say I know this because Henry is wearing leopard skin, which must have been expensive in 1509. Okay? So again, if you've circled something different, go ahead and write your own inference now, using mine as an example. Pause the video, do that now. Okay, so really the rest of this lesson, you're going to be doing some reading and answering some questions and thinking about then at the end, through writing a paragraph, what really mattered to young Henry VIII. So really all your reading should be thinking, I'm preparing for that. Now you can see at the top here it says, read the information below about young Henry VIII and underline anything that mattered to him. And then around the portrait of young Henry on the last page, that means this portrait here, you're going to write down at least 5 statements about what mattered to young Henry VIII. Okay, now there's not an example on the board as it says, obviously, because you can't see the board, but I'm going to give you an example now. So when I say the reading, what you are reading is everything on this page that you're currently on and the next page, okay? All of this reading. So it says you need to underline anything that mattered to him, anything that mattered to young Henry. So we'll do the first couple of paragraphs together. You're reading from the early years of Henry's reign, 1509 to 1525. And we're going to start with the quest for a son. I need you to pause the video now and go and read these 2 paragraphs. Read the first 2 paragraphs. Pause the video now. Okay, I'm going to read it to you and show you what I mean when I say to underline things that mattered to him. The early years of Henry's reign, 1509 to 1525. The quest for a son. Henry was determined to secure the future of the Tudor dynasty. Now at this point I can't remember what dynasty means, so I'm going to go back to the keywords and I'm going to remind myself. What does dynasty mean? Oh yeah, dynasty means when one family or a group rules a country. So like the Tudor dynasty, all of the Tudor kings and queens. Great. That makes sense to me now. So he needed a son to be the next king when he died. In June 1509, the king married Catherine of Aragon, a Spanish princess, who was the widow of his dead brother Arthur. On New Year's Day 1511, Catherine gave birth to a baby boy. Henry organised 2 days of banquets, dancing and magnificent jousting at his palace in Westminster to celebrate. 7 weeks later, Henry was devastated when the baby boy died. Okay, I think in that paragraph there's a couple of things that I could underline. For example, he was determined to secure the future of the Tudor dynasty, so he needed a son. Clearly, that's something that really matters to him. It's important to him that he makes sure there's a future for the Tudors. There is a next person, a next son in line to be king. Now, I also think what tells me that that's important to him, more evidence to prove that it matters to him that he has a son, is what he did after the birth of his baby boy. Henry organised 2 days of banquets, dancing and magnificent jousting at his palace in Westminster to celebrate. Now that tells me that clearly having a baby boy really matters to him, because he spent a heck of a lot of money on organising a big party to celebrate the birth of his son. I'm going to read the next paragraph too. Over the next few years, Catherine had several children that died before or shortly after birth. In 1516, Catherine gave birth to a healthy baby girl, Mary, the future Mary I. For Henry, though, the idea that Mary could rule England when he died was unthinkable. England had never had a female ruler. Henry was still desperate for a son. Now, I don't think there's much I can underline here that really tells me anything new that mattered to Henry. But I think there's probably more evidence that what really matters to him is a son. In 1516, Catherine gave birth to a healthy baby girl, Mary. But Henry was still desperate for a son. That's more evidence that I could use. Now, you're going to go on and read the rest of the reading, as I said. But I'm going to show you what you're going to do once you've underlined everything. Now, like I said, or like it says on the last page, around this portrait, you're going to write things that mattered to Henry. And you're going to need at least 5 statements. So I'm just going to write here, well, what mattered to Henry was having a son to secure the future of the Tudor dynasty. That's what matters to him. Okay? You can now go off and read the rest of the reading, underline things that matter to him, and write at least 5 statements. At least. So you can write more than 5. There's also a challenge task that you can do if you finish that. Pause the video and do those tasks now. Okay, now the next few tasks are preparing you to write your claim paragraph about what mattered to young Henry that you're going to do at the end of the lesson. So you need to think about what mattered most to Henry VIII when he was young. You may have written down a number of things like jousting or having a son and securing the future of the dynasty. You need to decide which you think are the 2 most important things out of your list of 5 that matter to him. If you can find somebody to talk to about this, fill them in on what you've been learning, then you can do that. If you can't, don't panic. You can think about it, then write down your 2 things that mattered most to young Henry VIII. Pause the video and do that now. Now you can see whilst you've been doing that I've written down my answer. Having a son to secure the future of the Tudor dynasty. I'm only going to write 1 because I've only done 1. You should have written 2. Now that's going to be my claim when I write my paragraph later. As you know though, a paragraph is only a paragraph if you've got some facts. So underneath, I'm going to list my facts for my reason. What facts do I have to prove this? Well, I need 2 for each of the things that I've said matter to Henry. So, 1, having a son mattered most. Now I need some facts. Now I've made this really easy for myself because I can just go back to the things that I underlined when I was reading earlier. So my first fact, Henry organised 2 days of banquets, dancing and magnificent jousting at his palace in Westminster to celebrate the birth of his baby boy in 1511. I'm going to write all of that. In 1511, to celebrate the birth of his baby boy with Catherine of Aragon. Saw an extra opportunity there to get another fact in. Catherine of Aragon was Henry VIII's first wife. Birth of his baby boy with Catherine of Aragon. Henry organised 2 days of banqueting, jousting and dancing at Westminster Palace. Great, there's my first fact. A second fact I could use is the other thing that I underlined. In 1516, Catherine gave birth to a healthy baby girl, Mary, but Henry was still desperate for a son. In 1516, Catherine of Aragon gave birth to a healthy baby girl, Mary, but was still desperate for a son. You could also write some extra facts underneath if you wanted to, and I would encourage you to do that. The more facts that you have, the better. Now, you will also go ahead and do facts for your second thing that matter to him. And then you need to do the last task. We've spoken about this before. Some facts are just more powerful, are just better than others. So you need to think carefully about what your most powerful facts are and put a star next to your two most powerful facts for each reason. Put a star next to your two most powerful facts for each reason. Pause the video now and complete both tasks, writing your facts and working out what your most powerful facts are. Pause the video now. And once you've done that, the last thing that you're going to do in this lesson is write 2 claim paragraphs explaining what mattered most to young Henry VIII. So everything you've done in this lesson. Now I've given you a structure strip here to help you structure your paragraph, or your 2 paragraphs rather, so you know how to write them. But it should be familiar to you already because you've done it lots of times. So, pause the video now, go and write your 2 claim paragraphs to answer the question, what mattered most to young Henry VIII? Okay, let's move on to the second lesson for this week, which is lesson 8, what mattered most to middle-aged Henry. So we're talking about Henry when he's sort of in his late 30s, 40s now. And the date's 1526 to 1534. Now, there's going to be lots of things that are familiar to you, hopefully, in this lesson, because we're talking lots about the English Reformation, which is very similar to the Reformation that you studied with Martin Luther, etc. But still, as always, you need to first of all go and read the key words and the definitions. Pause the video, read those keywords and definitions now. Okay, now once you've done that, you need to complete the vocabulary box based on the word Catholic. If you're unsure, a reminder that you need to go and look at the knowledge organisers. You've got Cycle A, B and C in the front of this workbook, and use that to help you. Pause the video here, complete the vocab box now. Once you finish those, or that vocab box, you need to move on to the task underneath. Now it's another inference task, and this is a picture. You call it a woodcut actually, because it's cut into wood and then stamped, so they could do it lots of times again, a bit like printing really. This is a picture or a woodcut from the time, from when Henry VIII was in his middle-aged period, 1526 to 1534. And it's very busy, this picture. It shows lots of things. But I've pointed out and would like to point out to you a couple of people who appear. Now, the first person should be quite obvious. It's Henry VIII, sat on his throne in the middle. But you'll notice at the feet of Henry VIII that there's another character. And that person is the Pope at that time. Can't remember what the Pope is? Go and look at the keywords at the start of this lesson. So you're going to start by just making a list of things that you can see. You could mention Henry VIII and the Pope and whatever they're doing. You could mention other things around as well. You're then going to answer question 2, well, why might you put your foot on someone? And then, what can you infer has happened between Henry VIII and the Pope? And you must always start an inference question with the sentence starter, I can infer. If you finish that, then move on to the challenge task underneath. Pause the video here, do tasks 1, 2, 3 and the challenge now. Okay, you might have made a load of notes. You may have written about the Pope having his feet on, having his feet on the Pope, which leads us on to our next question. Why might you put your feet on somebody? Well, I think it's about keeping them down. It's about showing that you're in charge. It's maybe, to use one of the key words that you read earlier, it's suppressing somebody, stopping a person or group from doing something. And it's similar to that word oppressed that we used a lot when we spoke about the Normans. So what can we infer has happened between Henry VIII and the Pope? Well, I think I would be writing something like this. I can infer that some disagreement has happened between Henry and the Pope, and that Henry seems to think that he's come out on top and is in charge, suppressing the Pope. So what messages might Henry be trying to send in this picture? Well, that the Pope has been suppressed, that he is in charge, that maybe he's taken over religion. Now, what's really interesting, if you move on to the next page, is that picture, that woodcut from 1534, is actually called the Pope Suppressed by Henry VIII. Now, we've spoken about that word suppressed already, but if you want to, if it's going to help you to understand it, try and find somebody now and discuss with them what the word suppressed means. Pause the video now and do that. Now, you'll probably see there the next task asks you to think back to last lesson and what reward did the Pope give to Henry. If you're not sure, if you can't remember, go back and read the information in the last lesson now and write your answer here. Pause the video and do that now. Now, hopefully you'll remember that in 1521, Henry was named the Defender of the Faith by the Pope for defending Catholicism, that means the Catholic faith, against the Reformation, against Martin Luther and the changes that he was bringing in, changing from Catholic to Protestant church. So I think this is really interesting. But why might I think that it's surprising? Find somebody and discuss that question with them. Once you've done that, write your answer to the question in a full sentence underneath. Pause the video and do that now. So I think this is surprising, Year 7, because in 1521, 13 years before this, Henry has been given an award by the Pope, the Defender of the Faith. Clearly, he's really in the Pope's favour. The Pope loves him. So why, 13 years later, is Henry producing a picture with him with his feet on the Pope, saying that he's suppressed the Pope? Something has happened here, quite dramatic. a significant change that we need to unpick. To help you do that, you need to start by doing the reading underneath. Pause the video and read this passage to yourself now. Okay, I'm going to read it to you. The source tells us a lot about what mattered to Henry VIII in the middle years of his reign. In 1526 to 1534, Henry VIII has his foot on the Pope. In the middle years, I'll start again. The source tells us a lot about what mattered to Henry VIII in the middle years of his reign, 1526 to 1534. Henry VIII has his foot on the Pope, the leader of the Catholic Church. He is using the Pope as a footstool. On his right, Catholic priests watch, shocked at what they can see. On the left, Henry hands a new Bible, you can see it here in his hands, to Thomas Cranmer. The Bible is a Protestant Bible. Thomas Cranmer was Protestant. Henry made him the Archbishop of Canterbury, and I'm sure you all remember that the Archbishop of Canterbury is the most important priest in Britain. So this tells us that religion was important to Henry VIII, as he made a revolutionary change. He transformed England from a Catholic to a Protestant country. But why did he do this? How did Henry VIII go from being rewarded by the Pope for his loyalty in 1521 to radically changing England's religious loyalties? The story is all about marriage, power, and Henry VIII's biggest obsession, his desire for a baby boy. We'll uncover this story today. Move on to the next page, year 7. Now, I've sent you the slides that you need to complete this. It says fill in the historical narrative strip. That's what this sort of strip you can see with the chains, the links is. When we say a historical narrative, well, it's a historical story. It's a story based in facts, things that happened. You're going to use the slides across the next 4 pages, the slides in the PowerPoint that I've sent you to fill in each of these cards, okay? So you're going to need to read, in order to do that, the card at the start and the next card, and so on, because that's going to help you to understand. For instance, it says here, Catherine of Aragon was 40 and only had one daughter with Henry VIII, Mary Tudor. Anne Boleyn was. So I'm going to need to fill in this information from what I've sent you on the slide. You're also then going to go ahead and read the next card without a chain. Cardinal Wolsey was Henry's. Henry asked him to, but he failed because. Now, why am I going off and skipping one? Why am I going ahead? Well, I need to know what happens next so I can explain the link. So I can explain how this led to this. This led Henry to want to, because, but. So what I'd be filling in here is, how old is Anne Boleyn? What does Henry want from her? Well, I know that Anne Boleyn is young and that Henry thinks that she's more likely to give him a son. So this led Henry VIII to want to divorce Catherine of Aragon because he believed Anne Boleyn would give him a son, but the Pope would not give Henry a divorce. So Cardinal Wolsey was Henry's advisor, and Chancellor. Henry asked him to negotiate with the Pope to get a divorce. But he failed because. Now at this point you're probably getting the idea. So I'm not going to fill this one in for you. You're going to fill that in yourself. But a run through so you understand what you're doing. I would start by reading the boxes without chains. Read the first one and the next one. You're going to skip the boxes with chains for now. Because you need to work out what you're trying to link together. So here I'm trying to link Catherine of Aragon was 40 and only had one daughter, Anne Boleyn was, with Cardinal Wolsey was Henry's advisor, Henry asked him to, etc., etc. So once I've thought about these and filled these in, then I can fill in the link between. How did this lead to this? That's what you're filling in the link box. Okay? Use those slides I've sent you. Pause the video here. Complete this task now. Okay, once you've done that, you can complete the next task. Now you might want to, again, go and find somebody that you can talk to in your house, tell them what you've been learning today, and come up with as many different things that mattered to middle-aged Henry VIII as you can think of, and you're going to list them underneath. For example, you might still say, well, having a son mattered to middle-aged Henry VIII because, no, I'm not going to finish that off for you, but you should be writing why. But there's lots of other things you could write there. You could write about the divorce, for example. So pause the video here, make your list as many different things as you can about what mattered to middle-aged Henry VIII. Pause the video now. Now, if you finish that, you can all actually move on to the challenge underneath. And it asks you, what else can you infer mattered to Henry VIII from the picture the Pope suppressed by Henry VIII? It's the picture we looked at the start of the lesson. Now, I've given you some more information this time about who these people are. You can see there's a Protestant Bible. We pointed that out earlier. Archbishop Cranmer here, and Thomas Cromwell. Now, Thomas Cromwell will become very important to Henry VIII as his sort of chief advisor and his fixer after he executed Cardinal Wolsey. And you've probably read a little bit about him. So based on those things, I need you to write now 2 inferences about what else you think mattered to Henry VIII based on this picture. Remember, you should always start your inference, I can infer. Pause the video here, write your 2 inferences now. Now, once you've done that, you're going to do something very similar to what you did last lesson. First of all, go and find somebody and discuss this with them. What from the list you made on the last page do you think mattered to middle-aged Henry the most, which was the most important thing? And then write that down here. That would be your claim, your paragraph. For example, I might write down that I think getting a divorce mattered most. I'm then going to write down 2 facts that I could use. Now, I'm not going to write those for you because I think you can work that out yourself. But it could be things like, well, I know that he forced a divorce through by enacting the English Reformation and changing England from a Catholic, to a Protestant country forever, just so he could get his divorce from Catherine of Aragon. I think that's a pretty good fact that proves the divorce mattered to him. You need to write your facts now, at least 2, but you might be able to write more than that underneath. Pause the video here, do that now. Now, the next thing, and again, you've done this before, is to put a star next to your most powerful fact or facts. And then you're just going to complete the sentence below. Well, here, for example, I would be saying, getting a divorce mattered most to middle-aged Henry because, and I'd write my reason here. I'm then going to give my facts as to why I think that. And then finally, I'm going to explain, well, how do those facts prove my claim? How do my facts prove that what mattered most to Henry VIII was getting a divorce? Basically, you're writing a short claim paragraph. And if you finish that, you can move on to the challenge underneath. How radically did Henry VIII and his ideas change from the early years of his reign in 1509 compared to the middle years of his reign in 1526 to 1534? And you must explain your answer in detail. If you need more space for either the claim paragraph or the challenge task, you'll notice that there's a notes page on the next page in your workbook. And that's it for this week. I hope the video was useful.